Hey everybody, Kenny Bonus here with Bonus Accounting, and on today's video we're going to be going over the benefits of an S-Corp election and also how to create an S-Corp. A lot of our clients have been noticing that there's some tax benefits from becoming an S-Corp if they're already an LLC or a partnership or a corporation. So today we're going to walk you through some of the steps, considerations, and I always recommend consulting a good attorney on any legal issues that might come up. So we tend to get questions from our clients about how much money could I save by being an S-Corp as opposed to an LLC. So what we usually do is obtain the prior year tax return and we run an analysis on it to determine what it would have been like if they were an S-Corp and what it would have been like as if how they already were. And what we usually find is that they tend to save money by doing this. Based on how much money they bring in the first place can be a determinant on how much money they'll save altogether. What an S-Corp does is it assists you in paying less taxes towards self-employment tax. One thing to keep in mind is you have to pay yourself a reasonable wage. We're not going to be going too deep into what a reasonable wage is, but it's something that you could justify paying yourself a competitive rate in that particular industry for the amount of hours that you work. So keep that in mind as you go through this process, because you can't just pay yourself a wage of $10,000 and be bringing in net profit of $200,000. You're going to want to pay yourself something that's competitive in that market. I usually recommend consulting with your accountant or an attorney based on reasonable wage, because you're going to want to pull support together and probably put together a white paper that says why you chose that as your reasonable wage. You're going to want to justify that. So after putting the analysis together, if it shows that you're going to save money by becoming an S-Corp with that reasonable wage included, then we usually start the process with our clients and moving forward to become an S-Corp. One of the things you'll have to remember is you'll have to get a payroll service. You might do it yourself, you might hire an accountant to do the payroll for you. We're always happy to do it for our clients, but one thing to keep in mind is it's nice whenever you get payroll established, because as you start to bring on employees, you already have it in place to continue growing. And that's the best benefit of this. As you have an S-Corp, you're able to continue to grow and not be penalized for making more money. Some of the keys to ensure that you're ready to become an S-Corp is to make sure that you're already considered an entity, such as a limited liability company, LLC, or a partnership LLC, or even a corporation. You're going to want to make sure that you're already classified as an entity rather than just a sole proprietor. From there, like I said, you're going to want to give yourself a reasonable wage. Another key part of being an S-Corp is to ensure that everything is kept separately. You want to make sure that there's no personal expenses occurring within the S-Corp, and you'll want to make sure that they're completely a separate entity. I think that this is very important when it comes to the liability of things, but it's also very important to track the expenses of the S-Corp. You'll also want to complete a Form 2553. That's an IRS form, and we're actually going to be walking you through that today, especially if you're wanting to file an S-Corp election for a year that's already started and almost halfway over. We have some of the verbiage here to be able to help walk you through that. Additionally, at the end of the year, you're going to want to file an S-Corp tax return. This is different from your usual 1040 with a Schedule C or from a partnership tax return, so you'll want to make sure you file a specific S-Corp tax return. Lastly, you're going to want to make sure that you file and pay your proper payroll taxes. You might be the only one on payroll, but you have to meet the deadlines of your respective taxing agencies. That's for federal, state, local, and unemployment. So based on where you're located throughout the United States, you might have to pay different taxes, and you don't want to get behind on payroll taxes. I usually recommend to hire an outside accounting firm to be able to help process this for you. So what we're going to do today is walk you through the Form 2553 so that you might be able to do it yourself, or so that you're familiar with the IRS form that needs to be done. So we'll take a look at that and stick around. All right, so the first thing you'll do, as with anything, is go to Google and you'll type in Form 2553. I usually like to put IRS Form at the beginning of that. And then what we'll do is go to the first link, and it takes you to the IRS website. Here, with any IRS form, you'll always have instructions for that form and then also the form itself. So we'll click on that form, and this is what will appear. The first part shows you how and where to file this form 2553. You could either mail it or fax it. You'll look for your corresponding state and then use that particular fax number or address. What I recommend is faxing it to them. That way you ensure that they're getting it and no need to worry about getting lost in the mail. So for us, we are in Pennsylvania and we would be using this fax number. So that's one thing to keep in mind. So as we go down, I've already pre-populated part of this, but a lot of this is pretty straightforward. You'll notice that here under part 1, you'll be printing, I recommend typing the name of the business here. You'll then type in your employer identification number, which you'll have that since you're already an LLC or a partnership LLC or a corporation. Here you'll type in your business street number. Down here is the city, state, and zip code. Under date incorporated, you'll type that right in here, and then here you'll type in the state of incorporation. What I recommend for the date incorporated is when did your business file its LLC or establishing documents with the state that you're incorporated, and then use that date here. Moving on, if you're changing anything, such as a name change or an address change, you'll mark that here and then just put that changed address in the address area. And then this part, election is to be effective for the tax year beginning with month, day, year. See instructions. Right here is where you would put the particular day that you would like to be considered an S-Corp effectively. So we would put 1/1/2020 since it's the year 2020. And even though at the time of this recording we're in middle of November, it's a little bit late to be doing the filing. Down below we'll talk about what you can type into the form to allow for them to process this form anyway. So type that in there. Down here you'll select how your entity, how its tax year is structured. So most are considered a calendar year, so that's January through December. This next part is if it has more than 100 shareholders. Typically, if this is your business, it won't have more than 100 shareholders. Down here, this is where you would put the name of the officer or legal representative who the IRS may call for more info, and then their phone number. You could put your accountant here, you could put your attorney, or you could just put yourself or whoever the person in charge of the organization is. And then down under section I, this is if the S corporation election is being filed late. Why is that occurring? And then do you have a reason for that? So we used this specific verbiage in order to request the IRS provide us a late abatement to allow us to file the S-Corp election as of a later date. Typically, this would have been due on February 15th, 2020. So it's quite late. You can do a pause on your screen here on YouTube and type down this information. But this should be able to work to be able to get you S-Corp status, and it references various Rev PROCs that we've researched to be able to use for this. So once you get that typed in, you'll have the officer sign here, put their title such as president, CEO, partner, member, whatever it might be, and then date it. Down under the next page, you'll want to be sure to put the name of the organization here. So you'll put out the full name, and then the employer identification number. Keep in mind that if you're an LLC and you have LLC after the name, you'll still want to put that after the name here. Moving down, this is the part for the various partners to provide their signatures and approval of this election. So you'll put the name and address of each shareholder. You'll put a spot for their signature, so you'll have them sign here, date it here, and then this is where you're going to put the number of shares or the percentage that they owned. So if it was a 50-50 partnership, 50% here, and then 50% here, and you would mark the two partners appropriately. It might even just be a whole 100% one owner, so you can add that here. And then date acquired is usually going to correspond with the date incorporated, typically. If there's been transactions throughout the time, then you'll have that reflecting appropriately. You'll also have their social security number typed here, and then their tax year ending day and month. So usually what you'll see is 12/31 if it's an individual, just a calendar year. So once you have that, ensure that it's all signed. Scroll to the next page. Really, this doesn't apply unless you're changing a fiscal tax year. So you'll just want to make sure to put the proper company name here and the employer identification number here. Even though none of this will be applying to what we're particularly requesting, you'll still want to make sure that at least the top parts are filled out with the name and employer identification number. So that gets you to the end of the form, and whenever you mail or fax this in, you'll want to make sure you include each page and ensuring that each page has that name and identifier on it. Just going back to here, ensure that it's signed. You don't want to use a computer program such as DocuSign or SignRequest to sign these forms. You want to make sure that it's an actual signature on the paper, and that'll allow you to make sure there's no hiccups as your form is being processed. So then once you have everything, grab a fax sheet if you have a fax machine. Get this information put onto it and then send it over via fax. Or if you're going to be mailing it, I always recommend getting some sort of tracking number. That way you can ensure that the IRS received it. But I can speak to faxing it. I know that that's a bit of a quicker process, and typically my clients have received notification anywhere from 3 to 6 months after filing this. If you've filed this, typically you can proceed as if you are an S-Corp. I would recommend doing that because you'd be able to, if it didn't go through the first time, you'd be able to try again. So, and as I've mentioned in the first part of the video, you'll want to make sure you're giving yourself a reasonable wage. You'll want to do a little bit of deep diving into what that reasonable wage looks like. You also want to make sure that you're paying all the appropriate payroll taxes, that you're keeping the expenses separate from the business, personal expenses separate from the business, that you also are filing an S-Corp tax return at the end of the year, and that you're just making sure that everything's on the up and up. You could probably stand to save a lot when it comes to tax time. Your accountant could explain that to you in more detail. We here at Bonus Accounting are always happy to assist with any questions that any of you might have, and we are happy to help. Just shoot us an email, go to our website, bonusaccounting.com, and we'll be happy to help you out on this. Thanks, everybody.